Thank you, Natasha. Hvala lepo. Dobro večer svima. It's great to be in Novi Sad, always. What a great place you have here. Nice space to gather. And thank you for coming, to listening to me, to give me the opportunity to discuss with you, because I hope we will have an interaction around the themes of disinformation and propaganda. I'm here tonight with a team from my embassy, Slavica Marković-Sandić, who is our staff member in charge of public diplomacy, that is communication, and thematic promotion. And Anna Leupur, who is working with us and with Slavica on that field and many other things. And we have Zoran, who is taking pictures and who's also a wunderkind in digital communication. So at our embassy, we put a lot of effort into communicating what Sweden stands for, what we work for, what we see, and what we would like to see around the world. Sharing our own experiences, sharing our solutions for societies. I will try to speak for not longer than 30 minutes. Then I hope that you will have questions or comments to what I've said. If there is something, I know you're university students, you're probably very, very, very good in English, but if there is something that's not clear, please stop me, and then I have two fluent Swedish speakers here who can help. Swedish Serbian, I should say. So the topic is obviously disinformation, so I will start by talking about some central notions and precepts, what it is we talk about when we talk about disinformation. Then I will say one or two words about myself, what it is to be a diplomat, to be an ambassador, and what it is that we are doing and trying to do in Serbia. And then we will get deeper into the global trends when it comes to disinformation and propaganda. But let me just start with the basics, and if I were better prepared, I would have a full PowerPoint presentation here. Now we just have this, and we have two more slides coming, but let's look at the basic notions. You are students of communication, so you probably already know, but disinformation is obviously material that is shared on purpose. Misinformation, it's information, but I don't want to say information because it's not information. It's erroneous elements that are shared not by purpose. It's when somebody shares something and they don't know that it's actually not correct or true or factual. Then we also have malinformation, and mal, you know that it's bad. So this is elements or information that is shared to hurt someone. It can be to commit digital crimes and having you to divulge your bank details, for example, and rob you of money, something that we are experiencing now in Sweden, especially the older population. And then finally we have propaganda, and I'm sure you know that this is the spreading of ideas and information that is inaccurate, that is not factual. It can be rumors, and for the purpose of either helping a cause or an institution by spreading lies and distorted information, or by injuring an institution or a country, or it can be injuring a cause or a person or several persons. Now, what we are talking about when we're talking about disinformation and all the other notions that we just discussed is about human rights. Because the access to information, proper, factual information that is unbiased, that's part of the freedom of expression. You know that the freedom of expression is one of the human rights. Freedom of expression is, states that everyone has the right to hold an opinion about something, to seek information, to receive information, and to share information and ideas through any media and regardless of any frontier. The limits of the freedom of expression do exist. That limit appears when what is shared or advanced borders to what we call hate speech. And hate speech in legal terms is incitement to hatred and violence. But up until that point, everyone has the right to say, share, and seek information. And human rights are rights that are inherent with us. We have them just because we exist, just because we are human beings. They are not granted by any state. They are not granted by the country you live in. They apply for everyone, everywhere, and all the time. And why is this? Because the international community in 1948 agreed in the United Nations General Assembly that gathers all states of the entire world. They agreed to adopt the Universal Declaration on Human Rights. This is a text where one states what are human rights. They are political and citizens' rights, and they are economic, social, and cultural rights. But that's another lecture. But I wanted to take a step back to just remind you, in case you don't think about it, that disinformation is connected to the freedom of expression, and that freedom of expression is a right that you all have. Obviously, human rights apply, as I said, to everyone, everywhere, and all the time. It doesn't matter what religion you might have, what ethnicity you might hold, where you live on the earth, what sexual orientation or gender identity you have, what language you speak, etc. They apply equally. That was a bit of the background to what I'm going to speak about tonight. If I stop for a few moments to talk about myself, before coming to Serbia 2 years and a bit more ago, I was coming from Stockholm, where I had spent the last 5 years. And there I was having a role in our diplomacy that is a little bit unique. It's a role or a function that is called Ambassador for Human Rights, Democracy and the Rule of Law. And this is why I'm keen on speaking about these issues. It's a function that has existed in the Swedish Foreign Service since 40 or so years back. And why have we introduced such a function in the Swedish diplomacy? Because we find it so important to stress the centrality, both for our country, Sweden, but also for how countries live together on this earth. Human rights, democracy, and rule of law provide the playbook, the rule book for all of us. So that was the past 7 years I've been working with this. I joined the Swedish Foreign Service in 1995, and I've spent most of my time abroad. You know, sometimes you work for a couple of years abroad, and then you work at home, and you alternate. And this is my 5th posting. I've been posted twice to the Middle East and twice to Africa, sub-Saharan Africa. And of course the context have varied a lot. I mean, now I'm in Serbia, it's in Europe, I feel it very much. It's easy to feel welcome in Serbia, and it feels close to home. It takes me, 2 hours to take a direct flight to Stockholm, so it's very different from the previous postings. But what is common for all these postings and the work that I've been doing in Stockholm, it is the very purpose of being a diplomat. To be a diplomat means promoting, advancing, advocating how you see society, what you believe in, your basic values, and how you can perhaps share your own experience and best practices, as I said, with the outside world. And I have to say, I've been privileged to serve so far as a Swedish diplomat because I've had the luxury of representing a country that sees human rights, democracy, and the rule of law as a foundation for our state and society. This is what we are. We have managed to build strong, independent institutions that are accountable to the people through media, a transparency of a high degree, rather progressive legislation on anti-discrimination, on human rights again, and gender equality. So, sure, we have been able to do this because we haven't been at war for 200 years. We've had the time to build up a strong civil society that could push the parliament, governments, the elected officials, to move in a progressive direction. And therefore, today, we have a country that is characterized by a strong social contract, where there is a high degree of trust between institutions, the government, and the people. And this is something we need to nurture because the world is becoming more complex, more shaky every day. So now is the music interlude, so I should... No? I don't know where that came from. Okay. Maybe it means I spoke too long. So human rights is a cornerstone of Swedish foreign policy. What we have achieved at home, we'd like to show to the world, because we think that everyone in the whole world, we know that they are holders of human rights, and we think that it's up to countries to respect their international obligations and grant human rights to their people. We are furthermore convinced in a rules-based international order. Now, you're not studying political science, so I don't expect you to know, but does anyone have an idea what a rules-based international order is? What do I mean by saying this? No? I don't know. Okay. A rules-based international order is what I referred to before. It has to do with the fact that the international community, in the framework of the United Nations, which is our biggest international platform for interaction and coexistence in this world, it's a flawed one, it's not perfect. The United Nations is the aggregated will of all its member states. It's not something else. A former Secretary General who said, Swedish Secretary General of the United Nations said, the UN it's not heaven, but it's also not hell. It is what we make out of it, and we could not live without it. And the United Nations has, after the Second World War, established a set of rules anchored in international law that govern how countries relate to one another, with human rights at the core. So my country, Sweden, believes in this rules-based international order where you cooperate in different international forums on how we can try to avoid conflict, how we can prevent conflict, and when conflict arises, how we can manage it. And we have endless challenges. The world is becoming an ever more complex and difficult place. But there is no other way than to try to make the best of it and to stick to the rules, that is, the laws that we have created together. So we don't believe in an international system where the most powerful decide. It's not power or influence that should shape how the world is faring, but every nation has its own saying and its own destiny. Here in Serbia, our embassy, the Swedish embassy, it's a rather big embassy. Sweden has embassies in all Western Balkan countries except for Montenegro, that we cover from Belgrade. And we don't have an embassy in Slovenia anymore. It's covered from Budapest. But otherwise, we have embassies in all Western Balkan countries. And we also have development cooperation, that's support in money. Here in Serbia, everything that we do through political dialogue with your government, with institutions, with civil society, to defense dialogue, and to promoting Swedish ideas and solutions, and development cooperation, that is support to help Serbia come closer to the EU. It all boils down to the strong conviction of us that Serbia's place is in the EU. Serbia belongs to the EU. We need you in the EU, but we also are convinced that Serbia's citizens deserve to be members of the EU, because the EU can offer a genuine agenda for the future with freedom, economic prosperity, and security, and human rights. Now we live, as I said, in difficult times. There is growing polarization in the world. We see that democracy is backsliding. There was a positive trend for many decades when the introduction of democracy all around the world was progressing. Now there's been a shift. More and more countries take an authoritarian turn. That means that the institutions of democracy are being eroded. It means that the judiciary, the legal system, is under political influence, that the media is not free, and that civil society has their space shrinking for their agency. Something that changed a lot for us and for Europe and the world, perhaps, is of course Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine in 2022. That was a milestone because we had a nuclear power that waged a full-scale war of aggression against its neighbor, an Orthodox, Slavic, democratic, and neutral, military-neutral country that posed no threat whatsoever to Russia. And this means that if this could happen to Ukraine, it could happen to others. Sweden is almost a neighbor to Russia. And this has prompted us to reconsider our situation in Europe. Our situation has been hurt by this war. Then we have the situation in Israel and Gaza right now that also gives room for a lot of polarization, where many in the world feel that they have a stake. There's a lot of distortion and misinformation, disinformation around what is happening. And we are also seeing new waves of anti-Semitism, including in Sweden and here in Serbia. So, this was my intro. This is why I think the discussion we're having tonight is very timely. And again, I'm happy for this opportunity, and I'm happy to contribute to your debate. Now, if I can come back to the notions. In Sweden, we are, as you will hear, very concerned about disinformation and propaganda spreading around the world, because these shape false narratives. They create narratives that are not anchored in the truth. So there are a lot of discussions on this meta level, creating dynamics of distorted narratives that are not connected to what is really taking place. And this, I think, deprives people, regular citizens, from reading their own situation in the countries that they live in, to read their situation, their country's situation, and their country's situation in the world, and other countries, and the entire world. And this, by extension, means that as a media consumer, when you don't have access to factual information that you can trust, that deprives you of a possibility to make informed choices. For example, when you vote. Also, disinformation and propaganda have the potential or the power to polarize public opinion, to put people against one another, to promote, in the worst case, violent extremism. We will come to that in my country's example. Hate speech, as I said, and ultimately, in the long run, to undermine democratic institutions, democratic principles, and to reduce citizens' trust in democratic processes. So therefore, disinformation and propaganda are actually threats to democracy and human rights, and therefore a very serious matter. In my country, in Sweden, we have, I said, a high degree of trust in institutions. The most popular public institution in Sweden, guess what it is? I don't think you will be able to, because I didn't know myself until recently. The most trusted public office or institution in Sweden. What could it be? It's the tax authority. It's the tax authority. Why? Because the tax authority has gone out of its way to make tax declaration easy and transparent. And this is a transformation that has taken place over many years. But it's a good example of the social contract in my country, where citizens feel that institutions are on our side. And this, in turn, grants the government or parliament peace of mind, because they know that if they explain and entrench and connect with citizens and have citizens on board, then they can proceed with policy. So there's been this good dialectic dynamic between those who are elected, those who are in power, and the citizens. Another key factor in the high degree of trust in Sweden is, of course, a strong commitment to zero tolerance for corruption. Corruption does exist in Sweden, but it's very, very rare. And when it happens, then a person is out. And here media plays a very important role. There is investigative journalism that has a very strong space in Sweden. And it's almost always either whistleblowers or media that, through their good work, divulge and find instances of corruption. We had prime minister candidate, a government minister who used her payment card from the government to buy, fill up her car once and to buy some chocolate, I think, and she had to leave. So this is the climate that we are talking about. Okay, we have this society that is quite advanced when it comes to democracy, human rights, and trust between people and between authority and the citizens. But we do experience waves of disinformation as well. Disinformation that can also express itself through threats to national security. And this is a recent phenomenon that we have witnessed in Sweden. Disinformation and propaganda can be quite strong tools in hybrid warfare. Hybrid warfare means war that is not done through weapons that you hold in your hand or you push a button, but it's through digital means. It's when you try to shut down, for example, the government office's email server, happened a couple of weeks ago, or to shut down the tax authority's office, or to create disturbances in our equivalent to Maxi or Idea, so people cannot pay with payment cards. It's just to sow, uncertainty and to make people feel insecure, to introduce new elements of security in their daily life, and to make people feel that my authorities don't have control. Here is someone who's out to hurt us. This type of war without weapons, hybrid warfare, can actually lead to armed conflicts. For example, for many years now, Russia has brandished Ukraine, its neighbor country, as a Nazi regime. And this is, needless to say, completely absurd. And Ukraine is not a Nazi regime. The president is Jewish, the former prime minister is Jewish. But still, it's a narrative that Russia has pushed over a decade or so to prepare its own population that it is necessary to go to war against its brother country. And Russia has invested a lot of resources into feeding this narrative, and it's still going on. Many, many people in Russia are convinced that the Ukrainians are a bunch of Nazis, that the president is a drug addict, etc., and that these evil Nazis have to be obliterated. So what we have seen now is that how this false narrative, this propaganda exercise of Russia has been an excuse for a full-scale war of aggression and even war crimes. In Sweden, I was mentioning that we have started to feel the effects of disinformation and propaganda campaigns as well. 2 years ago, one particular campaign started. It has to do with the child protection services in Sweden. And suddenly there was a mobilization around a rumor that came from the Middle East that claimed that in Sweden the child protection services kidnap Muslim children from their homes and put them as foster children in the homes of Christian Swedes. This was obviously completely untrue. We have a large percentage of persons of Muslim faith in Sweden, perhaps 15%, because we have been a country that has received large number of people fleeing from war and seeking political asylum. Now, this was something completely new, and it did not come necessarily from these people, from the Muslim community in Sweden, but from elsewhere. Forces outside of our country that wanted to hurt Sweden and make Sweden look bad. And this has led to a series of developments. For example, the individual social workers have been targeted, have had threats against them. There have been a number of demonstrations in Sweden, and it's been very difficult for official Sweden to cut through with our take on events, to inform factually. It has become a government issue because this has now caused so much frustration and anger in the Muslim world that it creates security threats not only for Sweden, Swedes who live in Sweden, but also of our embassies in the Arab world. This started 2 years ago. Then there was another development that is a little bit related because it also has to do with Islam. A year ago, an individual of Iraqi origin who is in Sweden temporarily started burning the holy book of Quran in public places in Sweden. This was to test the limits of the freedom of expression in Sweden and to cause a lot of provocation. Because, I don't want to get too technical, but according to the freedom of expression in Sweden, it is not a crime to set fire to a holy book. It's very inappropriate. It's very hurtful to anyone, but it's not a crime. And we know that freedom of expression has served our country well. So we don't want to cave in just because representatives of one world religion get upset. But these two developments have caused a lot of frustration and anger, and also propaganda in Sweden, Sweden's economic interests, Sweden's security interests. So now the level of terrorism has been heightened in Sweden. We now live with a rather high terrorism threat. So to sum up, these types of propaganda campaigns, they obviously are steered to or designed to discredit our country. And Sweden has been, for us it's a rude awakening because we are used to enjoying quite a good image in the world. Most people associate us with what I spoke about first, democracy, human rights, gender equality, etc. That we are a country that cares about the environment, for example, and friendly people and know what. Yeah, and safety and social protection. But in a short period of time, thanks to two propaganda campaigns coming from abroad, this image is now under pressure. Let me say 2 words about let's say, the background on freedom of expression in Sweden. Freedom of expression is enshrined, it's stipulated, it's in our constitution. And it's been our constitution since, anyone can guess? Take a guess. How long has freedom of expression been protected in our constitution? It's impossible to guess, but just pick a... No. Since 1766. So it means that we are the country in the world with the oldest Press Freedom Act, together with Finland, because we were one at that time. So since 1766, there has been legal protection for people to enjoy freedom of expression. There is a consensus in Swedish society that the freedom of expression, including media freedom, has been useful for our country. Sometimes freedom of expression hurts. Sometimes it's complicating. Sometimes one could feel that media and civil society are completely, always on the neck of government. I've been working in the government offices for 30 years. But we know that if we have a plurality of voices, we are stronger, and that makes policy much more sustainable as well. And today, free speech, free press, and overall openness and transparency are key characteristics of the Swedish society. According to our constitutions, those who hold power, those who we have voted into power, they must be held accountable for their decisions, and all decisions that they take and all their discussions must be accessible by the people. So it means that as a citizen, you can just write an email to your municipality or to a ministry or to anyone in public office and request information, and the authority in question is forced to give that to you, unless it's a matter of national secrecy. That's a different thing. Our laws also protect the identities of sources to journalists. Sources who give publishers, editors, and journalists or news agencies information. And journalists can never be forced to reveal their sources. Yes, I forgot to say, when I spoke about authorities being forced to share information, that is the principle of access to public information. It's called like that, and it means that not only individuals, like I said, but also the media can request information from authorities that by law need to share it. So this way, media, journalists, and the general public have the possibility to scrutinize the activities of government and elected officials at all levels and all the time. Both on a national level, on a regional level, on a local level, and this goes together with corruption. It means that since those in power or decision makers know that at any moment their actions may be scrutinized and known to the general public, that holds them in, that reins them in, right? Because they know that at any moment they will be accountable for their decisions. Also, civil servants and others who work for the government are free to give information to media or outsiders. You cannot be, if I would say something that is not national security, but if I would start talking to Swedish media about things I'm not supposed to talk about, it's not a crime. Nobody can punish me, but it wouldn't be looked upon favorably by my employer, but the law protects me. We also have whistleblower institutions in the foreign ministry, in all our national authorities and local authorities in every municipality. You have a whistleblower function that allows you to be anonymous if you want. So you can send anonymous mails or call or write a letter if you see something that is not right, that is not regular, and not risking that you will be punished for this. Now to media freedom. This is a topic that is of concern in Serbia. When I came here, I didn't know that 5%, perhaps, of all media outlets in Serbia are genuinely independent. That's a very negative fact. And it shapes your ability. It will shape your ability to work as journalists with integrity or work with communication. I wish it was different. In Sweden, media are independent of political power. Of course, a newspaper can adhere to a certain political ideology or line, but that's only in its opinion pieces and in the editorials, but in its reporting, it has always to be unbiased. In Sweden, media ownership is separated from politicians in the executive and in the parliament. No active politician can serve on the board of directors of public media outlets or media regulators. And there is a strong consensus on the need for public media. We have public Swedish radio and public Swedish television that sort of dominate the landscape. They are public, they are owned by the state, but they don't toe the line of the government. They are impartial. And in general, I would say that journalists in Sweden work freely. They are not prone to self-censorship. They don't run a particular risk of being bribed or influenced, because if they would they would write about it or communicate about it, and then it would be a scandal for the person who tried. And as I said again, the sources to journalists are protected. So again, we see a great level of trust in media in Sweden. During the COVID pandemic, there was a survey, a poll among youth between, I think it was 13 to 25. And the question was, now during the pandemic, with a lot of rumors and nobody knowing exactly what's taking place, and even the experts not knowing exactly how things would end, who do you trust the most when it comes to news about and information about the pandemic? Well, from this group, 13 to 25, 70 and more % said that they trusted most the public media, and they trusted least the social media. I found that interesting, and now we can move to my first slide. I think it's time for that. If I remember, there it is. Okay. No, it's not that one. So, yeah, here is a poll that was done here in Serbia by CRTA. Are you aware of CRTA, the civil society organization? They do splendid work. We support their work with money through our development cooperation for their work for democracy. Here we see in Serbia how traditional media is the lowest source of information. And then you have online media, and then you have social networks as a very big source of information and news. And of course, we see an interesting difference with the age group where I am, where one still relies on traditional media, which is mostly TV and print media, I believe. I don't mean to criticize media consumption among youth in Serbia, but if I were Serbian, I would be a little bit worried about this. Because we will come to this. The internet was such a promise when it was introduced, wasn't it? I mean, I just said that the Swedish Foreign Service has always held human rights as a foundation for our foreign policy, a cornerstone for everything that we see and do. And in the beginning, we welcomed the internet and social media because it was an opportunity to document human rights violations, to document irregularities, to share important information, to organize among ourselves, civil society, to hold power accountable. But now the trend has somehow reversed, because what we see a lot on social media is competing narratives, and narratives that are not necessarily anchored in reality or in facts-based information. Let's see, yeah. So social media has been, would I say, a platform that comes with many risks. Today, platforms such as Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, X, they are huge spreaders of disinformation, misinformation, and propaganda, and they are also rightly criticized for not doing enough to prevent this from happening. The European Union, that Sweden of course is a member of, has, as you know, solutions for almost everything in life. Solutions that take a long time to agree on, because we are 27 countries, very different countries that need to agree. But when we agree, when we come together and build measures for cooperation and we build agreements, it's very strong. Last year, the EU adopted a landmark legislation to prevent hate speech, propaganda, and disinformation online. It's called the Digital Services Act and Digital Market Act. Its purpose is to create a safer digital space where the human rights of social media users are protected, and to also create a level playing field for businesses so that there is no unfair competition. And this is new EU legislation, of course, and it of course only concerns the 27 members of the European Union. But when 27 countries in today's world come together and create this type of legislation, it will also be relevant for others abroad, right? So one concrete example of the application of this new legislation to prevent hate speech, propaganda, and disinformation was a warning that the European Union issued to Elon Musk of X a month ago, I think it was, because he, as responsible for X, had not prevented disinformation around Hamas, the terrorist organization Hamas attack on Israel. There was wrong information, there was disinformation, and there were wrong imagery, pictures taken from other parts of the world, from Syria, Afghanistan, and then put into this context. Now, if Mr. Musk does not comply with the European Union under this new law, he can face a fine of 6% of excess revenue, or if he does, or he can also risk that X will be blocked in Europe. So I think this is an example that the European Union has understood the dangers, the possibilities, but also the dangers with social media, and social media being a vehicle for disinformation and propaganda. And here the European Union has rallied together in finding tools to take charge over these very negative processes. Okay, I'm about to conclude. Let's see what I wanted to say more. I jumped a little bit in my presentation, so let's just see where we were. Okay. No, I think I'm where I should be, and if I forgot something, that's okay too. I'd like to finish with some advice for you as university students of communication and journalism. First of all, congratulations for having chosen such an interesting field of work that gives you so many possibilities for the future. You all have a role to play in strengthening democracy in your country and to protect the freedom of expression, to protect integrity of journalism. So my advice for you is something I'm sure you've heard already before, but it's worth mentioning. Be very careful when you consume media, including social media. Media literacy is key. Now I remember what I wanted to say. In Sweden, we introduced media literacy as a mandatory subject in school, not high school, 4th to 6th grade. Yeah, that's the same in Serbia. So for kids to learn to be vigilant and to check your sources and to take a critical view to information that comes your way. I also wanted to say before I continue with my advice that in Sweden we have also in the past couple of years, after this disinformation and propaganda campaigns that have been waged towards us, we have set up a national center for psychological defense. We have a state media council that has been in operation for much longer, that helps teachers and pupils with teaching materials for increased media literacy and the principles of fair journalism. And I would say that there is generally a heightened awareness around these issues, that we need to protect our society, need to protect our democracy. Back to the advice. Pay particular attention, please, to news or elements of information, reels, whatever, TikTok posts that cause sensation, that can upset you, that scares or that generates strong emotions. Because there might be someone who is trying to influence you. When you meet information or elements of information, you can ask yourself, is this information correct? Is it reasonable? Can it be checked against other sources? Who is the source? Is the source the one that it claims to be? Who's the sender? And is that a normally credible source that is saying this? How old is the information or the pictures or the film? Is it still relevant, or is it old information that is being recycled? And why is this information spread? Is someone benefiting from you seeing it in a particular way? So, in conclusion, my encouragement is for you to stay vigilant, to check your sources, and to protect the facts. I'll close by saying that Sweden has a long-standing engagement in Serbia. Our countries are close because a big number of Serbian citizens came to Sweden in the 60s and 70s to reinforce our industry that was emerging at that time. And we are very grateful that so many people from Serbia came to help us with that and to contribute to our society. Then during the very difficult 90s, there was also a caseload of refugees who came to Sweden. So today, the third biggest Serbian diaspora in Europe, after Austria and Germany, is Sweden. And this creates a beautiful bridge, this diaspora, between Sweden and Serbia. And what makes us so happy is when we see young Serbian Swedes whose fathers or grandfathers and mothers perhaps came to Sweden, but now their daughters and sons or granddaughters and grandsons come back with the solutions and experiences and practices from Sweden to contribute to Serbia of today. Because Serbia really needs all its young, talented people like yourselves to build the country strong, to build it democratic, genuinely democratic, and to contribute to Serbia thriving. I said that almost everything that we do at the Swedish Embassy boils down to supporting Serbia becoming an EU member. And for 23 years now, I think, we have been having development cooperation, that is Swedish taxpayers' money that go straight to Serbia and its citizens. We are the biggest donor when it comes to environmental reform. We try to make the air cleaner here in Serbia. We try to increase recycling and thereby to clean wastewater. We try to achieve better waste collection. all this to elevate the quality of life for people living in Serbia. But we also have development cooperation since many years to investigative journalism, to human rights, to democracy, to stronger application of the principles of the rule of law. That means a judiciary that is not politicized, etc. And to gender equality, where Serbia is already strong, I would say. So we have this commitment to helping and supporting Serbia, and I think I might have rambled a little bit, but I had many things to share with you, and I think I will stop there and invite you to comment on what I said, but I think we have one more slide. Sorry, now I remember. I just had two, but I forgot one of them. That's 50%. No. That's our social media that you will be able to follow after. No? How do I do? Ah. Nej. Hey. I don't know. I keep poking and nothing happens. The other one. Ah, yeah. Before I go, I cling to the podium. Another finding from CERTA that I just wanted to share with you quickly. I also found this very interesting and also disturbing. You see that politics is the area in Serbian society that youth is the least interested in. And it says something, of course. And I'm sure you have many thoughts on this. Then come world news, then corruption, misuse of funds. I mean, the list is not exhaustive, but it was the topics that were relevant to CERTA's poll. And then sports. Here, the interest seems the greatest. So this is something that one feels engagement to, because perhaps it's something that is genuinely positive and that is not subject to political strife or to competing narratives or mistrust in institutions and elected officials. Okay, so now let's see if I can go to the last one. Yeah, here you will find our social media. We communicate about more or less everything that we do, so as to share it with the broader public here in Serbia. So look us up. But now please let me have your comments or questions to the many topics that I have covered.